All right, let's turn, in the time we have, and now I'm going to go real fast, to issues surrounding the election. This is not in order of importance, but it is in order of things that have gotten a lot of attention. The Trump administration is currently considering, and probably will announce soon, a proposal to reduce capital gains tax rates here in the United States. Let me explain to you what that means and what that is. You know, in capitalism, you can earn income basically in two ways. You can either work and get paid for your effort, your labor. We call those wages and salaries. Or you can get income without working if you own property. Because you are allowed, that's what private property means, you're allowed to withhold the property from the community of which you are a part. In other words, suppose you live in a small community and you own the land, but the other people in the community have a desire to eat. In order to eat, they have to raise something on the land. You know, corn or a chicken or whatever it is they eat. So they come to you, because you own the land, and they say, let us use the land so we can all eat. But you're a private property owner, and you can say to them, screw you. It's mine. You know, like a 2-year-old in a sandbox with a truck. It's mine, you know, learning to hold on to things. Private property allows, but of course, this is a shrewd person who says, wait a minute, don't get angry. I'm not going to let you starve. You can use my land, it's mine. I'm not going to give it to you, but you can use it to raise the food without which you're going to starve to death. All you got to do is pay me. You know, we call that a rent. You got to give me. Well, that means that the landowner can earn income without working, just because he owns property. So there's two ways to earn income. By labor, you know, brains, muscle, effort, and ownership. The capitalist system does not care how you came by that piece. You found it. You stole it. You inherited it, right? All the different ways. You saved up. There's a few people who actually do that, and an awful lot of people who don't, but say they did. But we allow, so now the question comes, when the government is going to tax us to raise money, you know, for roads and schools and hospitals and all the things, and guns and all the things they want, the question is, what are they going to tax? Are they going to tax income that you earn by labor? Or are they going to tax income that you earn by property? Which one? They could also tax the property itself, not the income from the property, but the property. Those of you who live in New York, in fact, those of you who live in the United States, know that all our communities rely major way on a property tax. They figure out the value of your house, your car, and stuff like that, and they hit you with a percentage of the value of the property, not the income. If you have a house, you pay a property tax. If you rent out the house, you also pay an income tax on the rental income. Got you with me? Okay, in the United States, you might have thought, if you were very naive, that they would tax the income from property at a higher rate than the income from labor. Because after all, labor takes a lot of time and calories and effort and brain power and muscles, and you would want not to kind of penalize people who do that, and you would tax property higher. Or you might have imagined you would tax them equally. We don't do that in the United States. We tax income from labor, ready? Higher. And income from property, lower. That's because very few people have much property, and they're rich. And you get that? So they didn't want to pay taxes. This is going to come as a big shock. They didn't want to. And because they're rich, they arranged not to. For example, the property tax I just spoke to you. We apply a property tax in America to land, automobiles, business, small business inventories. But here's a property we don't subject to property tax: stocks and bonds. Let me do that again. We tax houses and cars. Why? Because you all have that. And we don't tax stocks and bonds because you don't have any of that. The rich people have that. If you have a house, you pay property tax. Let's say it's a $100,000 house. If you sell it and you take $100,000 of stock, you don't pay any property tax anymore. Who's rich enough to own stocks and bonds in the United States? The top 10% of shareholders own 84% of the shares. They've arranged not to pay any property tax.
Isn't everybody's 401k stock?
No. I mean, there may be some, but it's still that tiny percentage that owns the vast bulk. Most of you, to be honest, most of you either own no shares or a trivial amount. Your grandmother left you 11 shares of something that you think is still selling ice cream in the Bronx. But that's it. That's it. I'm being mean, but nothing against the Bronx. But here's the thing, what the government, Mr. Trump, is doing. First, let me tell you, what is the capital gains tax now? I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to do it for two people filing jointly. You know, we have a single person paying a tax and a couple paying a tax. The rates are a little bit different, but not very. So the first, if your income is between $0 and $78,000, right, you ready? The capital gains tax you pay is $0. So you don't pay any if you hold it longer than a year. You have to hold the shares longer than a year. If you hold them less than a year, you pay the same rate you do as labor income. If you earn between $78,000 and $488,000, you pay 15%. Now that's the one you want to think about, 15%. If you earn that kind of money doing work, you pay much higher rates, 20, 30, up to 37%. So if you earn $200,000, if you're doing real well, you pay on that 30-something% income tax. But if you earn $200,000 by buying shares at one price and selling them at a higher, you pay only 15%. It is a wonderful subsidy for the rich, since most Americans can't buy and sell stock because they don't have any, or the amount that they have make this trivial. This is and Mr. Trump and the GOP, at a time of inequality greater than we've had in 100 years, is proposing to lower the capital gains rate. It should take your breath away. Next time you read in the newspaper about the latest caca tweet, when the man is upset because the British ambassador called him names, said he was stupid and inept and all that other stuff, remember, all of that is theater, is to distract you from what I'm telling you. They are going, and the Democrats will probably go along with it. Okay? That's one thing. Next item, I'm going to have to jump because of time. The United States, China trade war and tariffs. This is a nightmare of craziness. So let's review to make sure you're all clear on it. Mr. Trump began a year or more ago to impose tariffs on goods from China. He had already done that with goods from Mexico and Canada, Europe, and so forth. But he really focused in on China. He got pushback on those other countries because of all the effects, some of which I'm going to mention to you now. But he figured out after a while that beating up on the Chinese sold here in the United States, was politically attractive. He could position himself, as he did, as the man who is not going to let the United States get kicked around anymore. That's outrageous what they did to us. This is the United States as victim, and the little victim that other people outwitted Or Mr. Obama was an idiot, or Mr. Bush was an idiot. In fact, everybody before him was an idiot, and he is going to fix it all. This is none too subtle a way of speaking to millions of Americans who do feel shafted, who do feel left out, who do feel taken advantage of. And he's going to fix it. That was his running, that's what he won by, so it's not so surprising that he would do it. And he found a whipping boy in the Chinese. So he whacked them with tariffs, as you all know. 10%, 25%, big tariffs. He obviously didn't understand what he was doing. I mean that literally. Why? He repeatedly said something for which we would flunk an undergraduate in an economics course for a level of mistake so egregious that it raised the question whether the student ever picked up the book. He kept saying, the Chinese are going to have to pay. The Chinese don't pay a tariff. A tariff is just a name for a tax. If you tax a good coming into the country, you don't call it a tax, you call it a tariff. That's just history. But there's nothing special about a tariff, it's a tax. So when Mr. Trump imposes a tariff, he's imposing massive taxes, which Republicans are not supposed to do. So it's very important to call it a tariff in the hopes that Americans don't understand. It's a tax! But then he goes further. He keeps saying the Chinese have to pay them. They don't. The tariff is a tax put on the importer. Whoever the company is that brings from China the clothing, the appliances, the machinery, whatever it is, the tax is levied on the importer who's an American business. Americans pay the tax. You idiot. Now, it's possible for the American company to try to pass on the extra tax they have to pay for everything they bring by jacking up the price, in which case you pay. You're the one who pays. Walmart gets a huge proportion of everything that's sold in that store from China. If they have to pay tariffs, taxes on that, they're going to either have to absorb that as a loss of their profits or raise the prices in Walmart for the towels you buy and the coat hanger you get or anything else. So you understand? Tariffs are a tax on Americans. Why would he do that? Because he looks like he's saving us. He's screwing us right to the wall. This is a stunning achievement to get masses of people who will gain nothing and probably lose a good bit by the higher prices they have to pay as this filters through. Instead, he can posture as their savior, as their champion. It's like what the Republicans did for the last 40 years. Allow corporations to decimate the American working class, make it impossible for women who had stayed at home to stay at home. They would have to go out and work, otherwise the family could not survive economically. Destroying the family as the unit that it once was, because it was held together by the emotional work mostly of the women, who can't sustain that when they have to work full-time out of the house and are torn apart as a result. That same party that facilitated all of that celebrates the family. Wow. It goes to the people whose families it has destroyed and says, you know, your family's falling apart, vote for us, because we really love families. Wow. The only thing more impressive than that Republican feat was the inability of the Democratic Party to figure it out. Sad. Sad. So, what is it all about? It's fakery. It's very hard for you, I know, because you don't want to face it. And you don't want to face it for a good reason. If it's all theater, if it's all fakery, well, then where are we? Then what is true, what isn't? It's the reality appearance gets blurred in a way that makes you very unsure of where you are. But it is all theater. which is why you will see the abrupt reversals. There's nothing real going on here. So, of course, the last meeting between the Chinese leader and Mr. Everything got cleared up. Yesterday, the company that was a danger to America's national security, Huawei, a high-tech company, stopped being a danger. We're now going to trade with it. What? How'd you do that? 3 weeks of national security dilemma, gone. But, you know, it's funny, but it's also tragic what's going on here. Because we're all being, I mean you and me, we're being played with here. And played. But it has long-term consequences. And those are the ones I want to make sure you understand. Just give me a little bit because I'm going to run out of time. The Huawei company is a perfect example. It's not the only one, but I'm going to concentrate on it because that's the one you're going to read about, you have been reading about. You all with me, the Huawei company? Good. Okay. So the Huawei company is very high-tech. In fact, in 5G technology, for those of you who know what's coming, they're actually one of the leading companies in the world, way ahead of a number of American and Europeans that haven't done that yet. Okay, what Mr. Trump did was he sent a message to the world. If you, to everybody, every company in France and Italy and Japan and Australia, in China and India, you do business with an American company, you better think about it again. Because here in the United States, our political system is so weirded out that a president, like me, a president can intervene, can screw you out of being able to deal with a company whose inputs you've relied on. You've bought equipment from them. You've bought in a moment, you can be cut off. The president can simply do his little TV tweet theater, and you're screwed. Your company is in danger. Your survival as an entity. You know what every company in the country has been doing the last 6 months? Figuring out how to rely on deals with America less than they ever did before. Because that's the only rational response. No other country did this. The British, part of why there's anger, is the British decided not to exclude Huawei, even after all the pressure from the United States. A few countries went along with the United States, not because they had a problem with Huawei, but they had some business with the United States, and so Australia, for example, caved in and went along with it. Can imagine how they feel. Those politicians went along with Trump to get a good deal. They now look to their own people as morons. Well, national security. Whoops. National security just disappeared. They're hung out to dry. You were a fool. It's not good for the Prime Minister of Australia. Since he's a right-winger, I could care less. But it's not good for him. He went along. He sold his people on what Mr. Trump just dropped. I mean, it's classic. The long-term damage to the United States is immense from all of this. The short-term gain, Mr. Trump's re-election. You live in a country that permits that. The Republicans permit it with enthusiasm. The Democrats permit it with a lame opposition that never gets anywhere, excluding the few Ilhan Omar, Ocasio-Cortez. I get it. Things are changing, and that's very important. But the basic traditional parties have shown the world they cannot stop him. They will not. Of course, they could, but they will not. They will not. Today's New York Times financial section, if you get a hold of it, has a wonderful story, the business section of the New York Times. The excitement among New York's big banks. They have now squashed enough of the little bit of reforms that were passed, Dodd-Frank and so forth, after the 2008, that they're now on a buying spree. These were the banks that were too big to fail and are now bigger than they were and about to get much bigger. And how can they afford to buy it all? Because of the tax cut Trump gave them in December of 2017, which gave them the tens of billions of dollars they will use to buy up You're living in that. That's what it is. He took care of the military, he took care of the financiers. He doesn't have to bother with the rest of us because the military will mean he stays there and the financiers will mean he has the money to win the re-election. And we'll get some more of it. That's what you're watching. A re-election hustle presented as a grand struggle between China and America. This is a crappy movie, except it has real consequences, very real consequences, and they're mostly terrible, which most American companies know, but they are not doing anything. The companies most screwed by the Huawei interdiction lobbied ceaselessly in the last 3 months, and they are celebrating this week. They got that undone because it was not good for their profits. And they will now not have to support a Democrat to undo it. They will support Mr. Trump for having reevaluated the national security implications of all of this. Don't be fooled. If you don't let Huawei do it, it's going to be another company that does it. The Chinese themselves have already shown themselves more than capable of developing the technologies they need. You close off the United States, you're just going to speed up the technological advance they already showed us they can do. There's only racism that thinks that other people can't do it. We are the only ones who can do it. And that's childish. That's been disproved so many times. It's amazing that it still lives. One last thing. One of the arguments still made by leading Republican and Democratic senators, both, by the way, not just the Republicans, that Huawei is to be limited. The Democrats went along. That's one of the reasons Trump pushed it. There would be no Democratic pushback because beating up on China is so exciting and so wonderful that the Democrats go along with it too. So the argument was made, Huawei, you shouldn't do business with Huawei because they're very close, interesting term, very close to the military in China and to the government. Yes, they're a private company, by the way they are, but they're very close. Really? Close. You want to tell me what that means? Here's a guess. It's like the relationship between IBM and the Pentagon, or Apple and the Pentagon, or every American corporation of any size and the Pentagon. You really want to go around the world telling people you can't trust a company that's close to the government? That's the worst possible thing for American companies. You moron, you're giving ammunition to people who are going to figure out you're the proper target for that suspicion. Every shyster politician in the world, and that's a large number, is going to use that one in his or her own. We shouldn't have Americans running our telephones here in Paraguay because, you know, Verizon is very close to the American government, which it surely is. Most big companies are. This is a strange argument to have used. What demented short-term oh yeah, re-election. Re-election. A theater of re-election. Next, student debt relief, big issue. Mr. Sanders, together with the usual crew, we now call them, half a dozen progressive, I believe is the term now being used, members of Congress. I don't believe any other senator, but several of the Congress women, they're all women, I believe, on the Congress side, are now proposing a blanket universal debt relief. Now, folks, this is really interesting. It tells you something about where the United States is. The total amount of student debt in the United States now is in excess, larger than $1.5 trillion. That is huge. The student debt is larger in toto than the total amount of credit card debt outstanding. Okay, so you're talking a massive amount of money. So the idea is that if you support Bernie Sanders for president, and if he makes it, one of his first acts, he's committed, will be to cancel student debt.
It's all to the government.
What?
It's all to the government.
No, not all, but most of it is owed to the government. Cancel it. He's going to cancel it. Now, what are we going to do? This is really interesting. It's interesting first because it's got a boldness that you don't associate with Republicans and Democrats. Boldness is something only the very oldest of them vaguely remember. They don't do bold. They're afraid of bold. They like old, but not bold. So this is remarkable, number one. Number two, it's pretty radical. I mean, wow, you have a debt? You know, a lot of students are carrying debt in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Can you imagine what happens to the life of a 28-year-old graduate who's staggering under what he or she has to face, suddenly being told there's a candidate who, if you vote for him, is going to tell you one fine morning, you don't have that debt. Wow. There's loads of evidence that indicates students suffering with student debt are not getting married in the ways they used to, not having children in the way they used to, not buying a home in the way they used to. They can't afford any of those things, basically. So they're postponing or they're just not doing. So the social implications of all this are enormous. What can we say about it? What's going on here? Is it an attempt to get votes? Surely, of course. But I mean, they're caught up in an election race. That's what you do in an election race. But it's still remarkable that they dare to do that. Why is it remarkable? Because in every society for at least 5,000 years, when debts have accumulated, which we're not the only country in which debts accumulate. We accumulate more debts than most societies, that's true, but accumulating debt beyond what you can do, that's not new. And that has led societies in the past to blow up in war, military war, political war, between the debtors and the creditors. Right? That's why creditors, when they have enough strength, put the debtor in jail. There are even societies where they kill him. But they discovered that after you kill him, the chances of ever getting repaid go down. No. And so you don't kill them because you still got some hope. And then you discover the same thing applies to jail. They're not going to do real well in jail. And then so maybe not put them in jail. Figure out some way to garnish their salary. Get a piece of their future that they can't avoid, and all of that. But this is a problem. And societies in the past have sometimes come to this kind of a solution. Cancel the debt. Just cancel it. In some religious traditions, in fact, in many of them, this has been brought into the religion and made something that the religion endorses, organizes. In the Christians, and maybe others too, the Jubilee idea, which you can find in the Bible, is what happened in ancient times, the times when the Bible was written or about which it was written. They canceled debts periodically. Some societies did it regularly. Every 50 years, every 30 years, all debts would be canceled. Sometimes they did even more dramatic things. Think about these, because if a country can get to the point of canceling debts, it's going to discover some of these others. Here's another one. Every 30 years, the land was shuffled. The argument went like this. Joe over here got a really nice piece of land. It's fertile, it rains on it appropriately, the sun shines. But Harry and Mary over there, they got a crappy piece of land. It didn't rain, there was too much sun, there were snakes on it, it was awful. And that was it. We didn't know, and who knows snakes. So every 30 years, seriously, we shuffle. The land is taken away from those who did well, and it's a lottery, or you pick straws, and the land is redistributed. So everybody kind of gets a chance and isn't stuck forever, or his descendants aren't stuck forever with a crappy piece of land full of snakes. Okay? In other words, and this is what was said, to keep the community going so that we're not at each other's throats. We need to cope with the debts that arise, with the accidental uncertainties of nature, of rainfall. We need to preserve our community, and we have to take steps. And people understood that, and they did it. You live in a society that doesn't get it yet. But that's the importance of this idea of helping the students, because it's the beginning of the recognition that it's out of control, that what we have just done is so stupid that we are shooting ourselves in the foot. Every professor of economics, left-winger, right-winger, or in the middle, tells his or her students, the future of the American economy in the world, like of any other economy in the world, depends above all on the quantity and the quality of young people becoming workers. How many have you got? How disciplined are they? How well trained? How well educated? And you live in the United States, which is part of that. And what are you doing? You're making it impossible for people to go to school. The price is too high, the incomes of the families are too low, and the debts are now out of control. That's crazy. Germany, Finland, France, Italy. You know what it costs to go to college there? Nothing. My family's French. You pay a fee, it's about $400. That's it. Then you go to the university. Germany takes the lead. All the universities in Germany are free, not just for Germans, for anybody. Anyone in this room wants a college education, don't want to pay for it? Go to Germany. You're done. You have it. You have to pay for your upkeep, your clothing, your food, and all that. But you don't pay. Why? Because the Germans think this is a road to success. And Germany, just for the record, is the most successful economy in Europe. Has done way better in the last 10 years than the United States, by every measure that counts. So it's remarkable. But of course there are problems, big ones. Why just students? What about all the people who have borrowed? Why do people in America borrow for a car? Why do people in America borrow for a home? Why do people in America borrow for a plastic bottle of water at the bodega with their credit card? That's a debt. That's because Americans don't have enough money. But the prices are here and the income you earn is there, and so the difference is made up by debt. The reason you accumulate debt is that the prices are too high and the incomes are too low. And that's what an economic system does. It determines the prices and the incomes. And if the prices are too high and the incomes are too low, it's the economic system that's your problem. Not what school you went to, not this detail, not that. Don't get lost in the details. The system forces you to borrow because you don't have enough money to pay the prices. You know how you could get rid of the debt? Up the incomes and drop the prices. This is not rocket science. And what would happen if you dropped the prices? The prices, let's see, the profits would go down. And Mr. Bezos, get ready, get your handkerchief, would not have 160 billion. He'd only have 200 million. Poor man. Oh, what suffering. And all that money, which comes out of all the times you used Amazon, Mr. Bezos's company. Because who did we make the richest man on this planet? A man who delivers packages. That's what he did. And he did it, get ready, this is exciting, quickly. He did it fast. Isn't that wonderful? That's what you reward with unspeakable wealth? Because he delivered packages quickly. And Mackenzie is the number 22 richest person because she married the delivery man. Right guy to marry. She picked him out from all the other delivery men who were interested in her. Wow. Think about it. There is no mystery here. A system that didn't want to put its people in debt would either raise the income or lower the price or some combination. That's how this would be done. There's nothing. Would that mean adjustments have to be made? Yes. Relationships would be reconfigured just as they are for other reasons. Student debt relief is going to mean, if we go that route, that people with mortgages that are killing them are going to demand relief. As well they should. And people with car loans in a society that does not produce mass, cheap, well-organized public transportation, the way many other countries do, requires everybody to have the car they can't afford. Just like a crappy economy makes young people need a BA less useful than it ever was to get a job, which they can't afford, and so they have to go into debt so they can get that crappy job, which will never allow them to pay the debt back. This is, talk to young people if you're not one yourself. They'll tell you, this is impossible. This is a society that is building up to a big, fat explosion. Last thing, and I'll stop. The Federal Reserve, that was a hot one today. The Federal Reserve. What is the Federal Reserve, again, for all of you? It's the monetary authority of the United States. Controlling, by the way, monetary authority means very simple. How much money is circulating? How much money is in your pocket? This is important, right? Because how much money you have determines, among other things, what you can buy and how much of it you can buy. So controlling how much money there is and controlling the terms upon which money is loaned from one person to another gives you a lot of control over the economy. It used to be that money was something that the monarch, the king, or the emperor controlled because it's a very powerful way to shape a society. The thing is, the politicians used the money power to keep themselves in office and to get reelected, in exactly the way I just described Trump and the GOP manipulating the stuff with China to get reelected. So in many societies, it was felt too dangerous to allow the government to control the money. And the way this was handled was not to give the money power to the people, oh no, or to some democratic institution, oh, even worse. No, a separate, independent, whatever the word means, a branch of government, not the king, not the president in our country, not the separate, would be established. In most countries, it's called the Bank of the country, the Bank of England, the Bank of France, and so forth. We had once a Bank of the United States, but we're such a corrupt country that it got lost in the corruption too. So we got rid of it, and then in 1913, when it was clear we needed it, we brought it back, and we called it, instead of the Bank of the United States, we called it the Federal Reserve. Okay? Americans are very excited. If you're a bus driver, you feel bad. If you get renamed a transportation engineer, you feel much better. Okay, so it's the Federal Reserve. Every other country, it's the Bank of. We have the Federal Reserve. Okay, what does the Federal Reserve do? It's supposed to be an independent. It's supposed to do what's good for the economy, not to be controlled by whoever the powers are. Okay. Back in 2016, check with Reuters, I've done the work. Back in 2016, when Trump was running, he attacked the head of the Federal Reserve at that time, a woman named Janet Yellen, you may remember her, an Obama appointee, if I remember correctly. And Janet Yellen was attacked by him because he said she had low interest rates so that the Democrats would hold power. They would win the election. And she mustn't do that. Okay? He attacked her for doing what he's doing. And very few American newspapers did even the little bit of research to get that. One of my students, I didn't do it either, one of my students brought me the Reuters article where it's all laid out. Mr. Trump repeatedly attacked her. Okay, so what is he doing? Here's the problem in a nutshell, and this is the basic issue. Everywhere capitalism has come as a system to become the dominant economic system, it has had what we call business cycles. They happen every 4 to 7 years. Okay? Sometimes they are short and shallow. They don't go very deep. Other times they are deep and last a long time. The worst one, the 1930s. from 1929 to 1941, long time. The second worst one in capitalism's history, the one we're still in now, the one of 2008. That's why the 30s was called the Great Depression, and this one is called the Great Recession. Again, playing with the words, the same kind of problem. Capitalism is very upset that it has this. I mean, imagine if you, every 4 to 7 years, collapsed. Well, in capitalism, millions of people lose their job, tens of thousands of businesses go out of business, governments have no money to provide basic service. It's a disaster. You'd be very worried too. What is going to happen to your spouse, your friends, your family, your children? Collapse every 4 to 7 years. Capitalism has tried everything to stop that. Every effort has been made. Very, very smart people. They even developed a whole new kind of economics called Keynesian economics, named after Mr. Keynes, because he tried to learn from the Great Depression what you had to do to not have another one of those. We even imagined, because we were so desperate, that we learned the lessons from the Great Depression so we would never have one again. You can see what brilliant lessons were learned because we're in one right now, and it's the second worst one. So capitalism has been unable to correct this monstrous failure. Calling it a flaw sounds like it's a little bit of the left part of your pants that has a wrinkle. Like, this is not a flaw, this is a major failure. Can't do it. And they come every 4 to 7 years. And the last one we had was in 2009. 4 and 7 and 9. Oh, shit. We're due for one. You get it? We're already overdue for one. So, but this is serious. Everybody knows, and I mean everybody. Everyone on Wall Street, every financial advisor that I talked to. I was on television today with a guy named Peter Schiff. Some of you know. And we were supposed to be at each other disagreeing, but we ended up agreeing that the economic system in the United States is in such deep doo-doo that we expect the worst. So what? Why? Because he understands, like everybody else, we're overdue. Now, here's the problem. Mr. Trump, in order to get reelected, has been running around telling everybody, we've got a great economy. If you have a great economy, you don't lower interest rates because you don't need to, since it's a great economy. But of course, it isn't a great economy. It's an economy on the edge of breakdown. And for Mr. Trump, the greatest disaster possible is that recession will hit before November of 2020, in which case he can kiss his re-election goodbye. He's done. He knows it. Everybody around him knows it. Everybody, the people that I have went to school with. Janet Yellen was my classmate at Yale. I know these people personally. Everybody knows. It's like that Leonard Cohen song. Everybody knows. So Mr. Trump has been told, you've got to postpone that. And how do you keep the economy on the edge of disaster a little longer? You cut the interest rates. You make it cheaper for people to buy the car they can't afford, to buy the home they can't afford, to use a credit card a little more than they can afford, because it'll stall it off. Even, does everybody understand? The longer you stall it off, the worse it is. It's like stalling off that visit to the doctor. The longer you do that, the higher the risk you're going to get a bad diagnosis of something you could have dealt with if you had come earlier. Same thing here. For re-election, we are being told he's got to have to cut the rates. When he told that to Mr. Powell, my last thing, Mr. Powell is now Mrs. Yellen's replacement. He's the head of the Federal Reserve. He said, I can't do that. You run around the country telling everybody it's a strong economy. I can't cut interest rates. That's crazy. We have to raise them because we have too much money out there. We've been having them too low for too long. Well, Mr. Trump yelled at him, as you know. But Mr. Trump isn't stupid. He has good advisors. And he had to provide a reason for Mr. Powell to lower the interest rates. And the reason was global economic instability. Translated, trouble with China, trouble with Europe, trouble with Mexico. And so Mr. Trump solved the problem. He made trouble with everybody. And the world economy is in, and now Mr. Powell has a rationale for cutting the interest rates to help Mr. Trump get reelected, and in the process doing exactly what Mr. Trump attacked Janet Yellen for doing before. You live in a society where the economic system is in such difficulty that this crappy theater is what's left of politics. You ought to think that's the biggest problem. If the question put to Louis, I believe it was the 16th, just before the French Revolution, why are you doing these crazy things, building Versailles? He says, because I can. And they said, but you know, it's going to bring the whole system down. And then he uttered those famous lines in French, après moi, le déluge. After me, it all falls apart. The real message of this election for Mr. Trump is exactly the same. Thank you very much for coming.